Good evening, Grey Ghost friends. It is our Season 2, Episode 2 Sip Trips here with Al and Cheryl Kellert and our featured wine. I see people checking in. We're going to give them a moment. We got Diane Andrews in, John Andrews watching. Oh, and we're up to 7,000 people already. This is so exciting. Okay, let me go ahead and turn it over to you, Al.
Are we on? Are we on now?
Yes, we're on. Hi, Melissa.
Well, this is delightful to have you all back. We're hoping and praying that this one stays live. Terribly sorry about the episode fiasco last week. Our tower is right across the street and we still can't figure out why we lost connection. But the important thing is thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of it. And thanks more importantly for your patience. If you did have...
Let's real quick just make sure, can somebody check in and tell me if you have sound? Okay, keep talking.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
I got my direction from my executive producer, so we're in good shape. If you do have any questions that you came up from the last episode, we're sorry we couldn't do them live. Please get them to us via the program that Amy sets up for us, and we will get the answers for you one way or the other. So our objective is to make sure that when we leave you, you know as much as we do, and you'll be able to set up your own winery. Now last week, of course, we were in the vineyard. This week we're in the tank room. Last week we were looking at the very first, what makes a wine and how we go about starting the process. Now we're looking at the last step in winemaking, and that's bottling. From this point on, we're going to be looking at everything in between. But we thought it would be kind of fun to let you see the beginning and the end right off the bat. However, before I get started, I did have an interesting story that developed in the paper. Apparently there was a gentleman who was really anxious to win the lottery, and he kept betting and betting, picking up his numbers, and never had any luck. So one of his friends, he went to his friend and said, I think I'm stopping my gambling. It's just not working out. And the guy said, don't. You got to have faith. You got to maybe say a little prayer, and it'll work out for you. So that evening, he was walking home, came across a little old lady who was a street vendor selling apples. And as she leaned over to pick up an apple that had fallen out, suddenly a tongue of fire came down, and on her rear end, it branded 7-7. He knew right away this was his message. So that evening, he went out and he bought his ticket, 7-7. The next day in the paper, the lottery number was picked, and the number was 707. With that, I think we're going to move on to something a little more serious, and that's the wine itself. Today, as Amy mentioned, we're featuring the 2019 Cabernet Franc. And what I'm going to do is pour the glasses. As you'll note, there are 4 glasses here, and the reason for the 4 is we're still trying to adhere to the coronavirus CDC recommendations of always drinking your wine with 2 glasses. Oh, do I see a 5th? How impressive. Now, a little bit about the wine that you're enjoying tonight with us. This is 100% Grey Ghost fruit and 100% Cabernet Franc. One of the interesting things about our Cabernet Franc is when we got started some 33 years ago, no one talked clones. They only talked rootstock. So when we went to the nurseries, we identified the type of soil. They then selected the vines that would be grafted onto a specific rootstock. So for that reason, we have no idea what clone we have in our Cabernet Franc. Interestingly enough, most Virginia Cabernet Francs have a very distinct white pepper characteristic. For some reason, ours comes across with a hint of white pepper, but a lot of that beautiful black cherry. So we're really very proud of the way our Franc is developed. Also, I might mention, the clusters are very small as compared to the giant clusters of most Cabernet Francs in Virginia. This was small lot fermented, and then we aged it in French oak for about 8 months. This just gave it a nice round finish, and of course we're using older barrels in our Cabernet Franc as compared to reserves, which are always going in new oak. Like all of our reds, this is an unfiltered red. If you have one in your glass, be sure you note the color and the clarity. You'll note they sparkle. When we're pulling this out of the barrel, we're pulling it from the top down, leaving sediment in the barrel and giving us the clear, cleanest wine we can possibly get, especially without stripping it. It's then bottled, corked with natural cork, and giving us ability to even age this young red wine. The beauty of this wine is it pairs with lighter dishes like lamb, pasta dishes, pork, and turkey. So I hope you're all enjoying this just like we are. Wow, that's a good wine. Now, probably the most important report we have tonight comes from Cheryl. And I hope she doesn't spend a lot of time. We've got a lot to talk about. But Cheryl, I'm going to ask you if you'd like to give a little brief statement on what's happening in your life and in the life of the vineyard. Well, not a lot has changed, as we can well see, but I think that's the important thing, is we're a very consistent organization. I do want to give you a little bit of an update of what's happening in the vineyard and a little vineyard status. We are in veraison. Veraison is the word used when grapes begin to ripen. Our earlier ripening varieties are definitely moving along very quickly. That includes the Saval and some reds, which also include the Melbeck. We had a couple of severe storms that hit us over the last couple of days. And up until now, we were really hoping that we would not have had to put another spray on. However, Friday, I did put one last spray on, which is protecting us against downy mildew, as we talked about last week, and sour rot. Now that we're going into veraison, the last thing we want to do is have the grapes begin to develop a rot, which smells very similar to vinegar. That was the final spray. I also have to report that one of the storms did have hail. Now, it wasn't a lot, but I did see damage to some of the fruit, which caused it to bruise. That's another reason for the spray. If there's any questions during the course, I would hope you jump in at any point in time. Amy will give me the motion. Now, the topic of today is bottling. One of the unique things about Grey Ghost is we own and operate our own bottling line. Most small wineries our size use what's called the mobile bottling lines. These are trucks that come in to a winery, effectively bottle everything at once, and then move on to the next winery. There's a couple of problems that Cheryl and I faced with the mobile bottling line. Number one, you had to have your wines all ready to go. And like Ernest and Julio said years ago, not all wines are ready at once. So that basically restricted our option with the mobile bottling line. Secondly, we wanted to have total control of our product from beginning in the vineyard to the end at the bottling. Therefore, it was very important for us to have a bottling system that we felt was clean, unique to us, and could accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. Our bottling line is classified semi-automatic. This means that although we do have manual operations within the bottling line, much of it is mechanical and much of it is actually programmed. And you'll be seeing it in action in a few minutes. If you include me, when we're bottling, it requires a total crew of 9 people. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what actually transpires during the course of bottling. To begin with, all of the stainless steel equipment that you see behind me is sterilized before and after every bottling. This is extremely important This way we know that there is nothing in that bottling line that's going to cause us a problem down the road once the wine is in the bottle. From there, at the beginning of the bottling line, the bottles are moved over to young ladies who are doing nothing but sterilizing the inside of these bottles, effectively washing them. The bottles are then put on what's called a drying tree or drying rack, and this allows any moisture or water inside the bottle to drain out, thus avoiding water in the bottle when we bottle, and also avoiding foam. When you're bottling, a bottle wine can foam if it comes in contact with water. The bottles are then fed to the filler, and that's where I step in. Each of the bottles are hand-picked individually, placed on a rotating drum, which is filling bottles at a rate of 24 bottles per minute. Now that means we're pulling a bottle every 2 seconds off of this unit. This is when we're running at full speed, which is pretty much normal around here. Once the bottle is filled, it's removed from the filler, and keeping in mind, now goes one of the most important elements in the bottle, and that's the natural cork. The cork is inserted under vacuum, which means anything air-wise has been removed from that bottle, giving us a vacuum at the head of the bottle. This protects the wine from any contamination of oxidation or anything that could possibly cause a problem. I understand I may have a question or two.
So the first question comes from Dave Schultz. How much does a bottle cost, and are you able to recover any costs via recycling?
The bottles, a normal bottle runs anywhere from about 85 cents a piece up to about $2, depending on the type of bottle being used. Recycling, we just automatically recycle it at our landfill rather than reuse it. So you do not recuperate anything on the cost of that bottle.
Stacy Tiley would like to know, how do you really know the equipment is really sterilized? How do you test that?
Stacy, good question. To begin with, we sterilize it with ethanol alcohol. As a winery, I have the ability to buy alcohol at a much higher rate than the average consumer. So when I'm sterilizing, the unit is actually sterilized with 95% ethanol alcohol, killing anything and everything that could possibly contaminate the wine. It's basically the very same thing that's being used right now on the COVID-19, only it's even more powerful than anything that you would be able to get to be able to sterilize door handles, etc.
Yes, Michelle, Cheryl does have 2 glasses. You go, girl, from Alyssa. And Matthew Perry would like to know, should they return their bottles?
You don't have to return them, no. If you have a recycling center, go ahead and recycle them yourself, but there's no need to return them. If you do, all we'll be doing is recycling them ourselves. Okay, once the bottle has hit the drying and is now filled, it now goes onto a conveyor belt where basically the capsule is now going to be put in place. This is automatic. Well, actually, we use a hand capsulizer, an individual who will drop the capsule onto the individual bottle. It moves down the conveyor belt to a spinner. The spinner detects the bottle coming in and then spins the head of the bottle, in basically giving it the image that the capsule now forms the shape of the bottle. From there, it's released, continues to move down the conveyor belt until it hits the labeler. Once again, a sensor detects the label, or detects the bottle, and instantaneously a label is spun and placed and adhered to the bottle. From there, it comes off, moves down the conveyor belt to a large metal plate where it's now taken off the conveyor or off the system, cased and placed into pallets. From there, the pallets, once completely filled, will be moved into our other building where we're going to actually store this wine at 58 degrees. In fact, there's never a variation in temperature in the warehouse. This way we know that as long as that wine is in our possession, it's in a perfect environment. What we're going to do is now we're going to give you a real brief demonstration for those of you who've never seen the bottling line in operation. And we're going to do a modified version since there's just Cheryl, my beautiful assistant, and myself. We're going to run it so that you'll be able to see how the individual bottles run through the system and then what we're finally accomplishing when it's all done. I should also mention that one of the beauties of having your own bottling line is you can set the location of where that label is. I don't know how many of you have ever taken the different wines that we produce and lined them up. If you did, you'd notice that every label is exactly at the same height, giving us a visual perspective that's very important to our image. So, if I could, I'm now going to have Cheryl, my gorgeous assistant, help me run the bottling line. To start with, all wine is fed into the bottler through a line that goes directly underneath and into the head where the bottle is going to be filled. There are marks which you won't be able to see, but it designates exactly the height that this wine is inside this drum, so that when it's being gravity fed, every bottle gets exactly 750 milliliters of wine, regardless of what type of bottle we're using. It's all set based on the location of where the plate is. The young girls that are working the sterilization will actually have a piece of equipment that looks very similar to this. This is filled with a water and sulfur citric solution. This is a sterilizing mechanism that sterilizes the inside of the bottle. By placing it on the hood and pumping up and down, the water is now squirted into the bottle and basically sanitizes the inside of the bottle. From there, the young ladies will take the bottle and place them on the tree, which allows the moisture to drain. Now, although we only have a couple of bottles on these trees, each tree holds 7 cases of bottles. And the young lady who is feeding me my bottle is constantly pulling the driest bottles off of the 2 trees, rotating back and forth. To give you an idea of how complicated that is, to me that's probably one of the most difficult jobs. She's dealing with 168 bottles that she has to keep track of in order to make sure the driest bottle always gets to me. From there, yours truly now is operating the bottling line. And all I do is take the individual bottle and place it on the spout, which, by the way, is set up under weight to be able to lift up, and an opening in the bottle will now allow the wine to fill into the bottle. By pushing it in, the spout is now pushing wine to the back of the bottle, thus reducing the amount of splash and keeping the wine as still as possible. While this is happening, the unit is running at a constant speed. As the bottles go around, they're filled. By the time they get back to me, the bottle is now filled, and all I have to do is take it off and then place it on the corker. Now what you're going to see is the corker claws are going to compress the cork to a point where it's actually smaller than the opening, and it does it so quickly that the bottle cork actually goes in before it has a chance to expand. We now have a cork in the bottle. Now from there, the bottle now goes to a table, which we don't have right now, but 2 young people will be catching these bottles, each one rotating, so that one person is wiping down the bottle every 4 seconds. Any moisture that's on the outside of the bottle has now been removed. So when they put it on the conveyor belt, the bottle is totally dry and ready for the capsule and ultimately the label. As I place it down, the next young lady, in this case my beautiful wife, places the capsule on, and it's now going to be fed. You'll note that it was actually identified, labeled, and now, Cheryl, will you please show them the finished product? As you can see, the entire system is designed to move in a very automated fashion. We run this unit at about 24 bottles a minute, or close to 1,200 bottles an hour, which represents about 100 cases an hour going through this unit. Prior to this, we were hand labeling with wet glue, which you can imagine the amount of time that was spent. So this is what we're really proud of this. We're trying to accomplish a way of managing our product and managing it in such a way that we can assure the consumer and you, our many friends, that when you walk out of here with the bottle, you're getting a very quality product. Now, are there any questions?
Yes. Karen from Culpeper would like to know, where do your labels come from?
Our labels are manufactured in 2 different locations. We get one batch of labels that comes out of California and a second batch that comes out of Oregon. The ones that you're seeing on the Rosé and our Adieu are produced by an Oregon printer. All remaining labels are produced in California by a California printer. Great question. Anyone else? Well, I hope that this has been an eye-opener for you all, and you can see what we're attempting to do. What we're going to be doing in the future is taking you through other segments of the winery. We're really looking forward to taking you down into the barrel room and actually giving a hands-on demonstration of items such as wine stirring, monitoring the chemistry of the wine, etc. We're doing the same thing with the tank room. Yes.
We have a question from Tony. Who designed the label's original drawing? Wait, the originals. Who designed the original's label design?
You're looking at him. Next question.
I will say that Melissa had a fabulous comment. She said she's picturing the I Love Lucy chocolate scene, but in this scenario, instead of chocolate, Al and Cheryl are downing wine to keep up.
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what this looks like when we're running it at full speed.
Hang on one second. I'm trying to open. Sorry, Stacy, I'm trying to open your comment. Okay, so Stacy Tiley asked, the spout knows to stop once it's reached 750 milliliters. So a bottle can stay on the filling system until you're ready to move it to the corking? That's a really good question.
That's a fabulous question, and that's exactly right. When the wine is being moved from the tank, I have to set the pump at the exact speed that the wine can be filled in the bottle, which means that the holder, the wine trough, never exceeds that height. So yes, every time I miss a bottle and it comes back around, it still has 750 milliliters. No more, no less. Very good question. It's almost like it has a mind of its own, but it's our mind that's operating it.
Melissa Jane just popped in and said she loved your I Love Lucy comparison. And Jane, we have a fabulous new audio and video system, so thank you for tuning into season 2 for this.
Well, I hope you've all enjoyed it. Since we're talking a little bit of an agricultural issue, there was one item that we also thought was rather interesting. There was a farmer out here that he was growing watermelons, and he had one of the most beautiful fields of watermelons that you could imagine. And then he couldn't help but notice that he was going out in the field and seeing watermelon rise, and realized that the kids in the neighborhood at nighttime were going into his watermelon field and eating his watermelons. So he thought, what a great way of stopping it by maybe putting up a sign that would bring him into some form of reality. And he placed a sign at the entrance of it saying, "One watermelon has been poisoned with cyanide." The next morning he came down thinking, I think I've solved my problem. And there was a second sign that read, "Now there are 2. With that, again, thank you all so much for joining us. Do I have another question?
We do. So Dave Schultz says, does the foil wrap perform any practical kind of cork protection function from the sun, etc., or is it just cosmetic?
The reason they put foil wrap on is when a wine is stored in a cellar, and over a period of time, rodents often would chew into the cork. So they used initially tin capsules as a way of protecting the cork. Today we use a metal capsule, but it has no tin in it. The only one that we use with tin is the one we use for our reserve Cabernets. It does protect the cork, and if you look at your capsule, you're going to see 2 or 3 small puncture holes in it. This allows that cork to breathe. So while you're aging your wines, especially with natural cork, the capsule does not inhibit that wine from breathing. It actually merely protects that cork against any little critters that may decide to chew on it. Well, with that, thank you again so much for joining us. We've loved to be live for a change. You guys have been so patient, and more importantly, thank you for supporting us. It's been wonderful having you, and we look forward to seeing you all live and in real person.
This has been another edition of Happy Half Hour. Next week, we encourage you to make it a steak night as we are featuring the amazing 2016 Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. And as we sign off tonight,